everybody, and welcome to the Babylon Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to taking a look at the inner workings, discussions, and shenanigans involved in making one of the world's most powerful, beautiful, simple, and open web rendering platforms, Babylon.js. My name is Jason Carter, also known as Pirate JC, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, the creator and mastermind of Babylon, Mr. Delta Kosh, David Katui.
Yes,
Hello,
that's
David.
me.
How are you?
And
we have a very, very, very special guest this week, Gabe, the creator of Frame. Thank you so much for being here, Gabe.
Thanks for having me.
We're super, super pumped. You are the first guest we've had on the show outside of the core development team, which is awesome. Although I do consider you kind of an extension of the development team with how much.
I did not even consider Gabe as an external person until you mentioned it, right? Like
I know, yeah,
an extension of the team.
That's right, because you've probably stress test Babylon more than most. So, but let me stop for a second before I go too much further and say, what is Frame? Who are you? Give us a tiny bit of your story, if you would.
Sure. So I didn't start out in the computer world. I started out as a Latin teacher in Los Angeles. I got interested in
You said Latin teacher?
Latin,
Latin, like what the Romans spoke?
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Okay,
well, yeah, actually, all of Frame is coded in Latin. You didn't know that, but if you look under the hood,
Man, I need to. Yeah, okay. Wow, I'm blown away. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, my master plan is to get Frame so good that I can retire to teaching Latin in the Metaverse to anyone around the world who wants to learn it, and I'm actually very serious about that.
That's awesome. I love it.
So I started doing that. I got interested in education technology at the school I was teaching at, then ended up doing my graduate research. I went back to graduate school, did my graduate research on teachers and students using online 3D worlds for synchronous online learning. So like classes that take place in the Metaverse, which has been around for a while. It's gone through a bunch of hype cycles. This was when Second Life was pretty big, and all the research was done on Second Life. And after that, I went on my own like entrepreneurial journey, trying to like make a metaverse that was really purpose built for teachers and students, because you see a lot of teachers and students using these tools, like Second Life or like Roblox, even like all of them, trying to use them for education, but they're not really purpose built for education.
That would have been super useful during COVID.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. And then basically ping-ponged between various companies that were either in education technology or immersive technology or collaboration, usually at the intersection of all of those, and then eventually ended up at a company called Virbela. And Virbela makes a very good metaverse product. It's a downloadable application. While I was there, I basically, at the time, I had been learning about the WebXR browser spec, which was kind of like up and coming at the time. Like all of a sudden, you could make stuff for the browser that would run on a Quest, and of course would run on desktop, and of course would run on mobile. And there are a few tools out there, Babylon included, that let you build websites that could work this way. Now, at the time, I had been into A-Frame because this is when I started my own coding journey. As I said, like I was a Latin teacher. This is when I was like, maybe I'm going to learn how to code. And A-Frame is really good in that it's this very approachable way to all of a sudden you're just writing HTML elements and learning how to code and scrapping together a few things, and you've made this beautiful immersive website.
Yeah, very approachable. Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so slowly but surely, I kind of convinced Virbela, hey, maybe we should make a product that is accessible right from the web, because as good as their product is, they have some clients who come in and say, oh, we just need something that runs on the web browser. So that's how Frame came about. It was like a little beta project within Virbela as, hey, here's this version, here's this collaboration platform that can run right from the web. And then it was just me in the beginning. I coded out all of it myself, but then it kind of got to the point where leadership said, hey, maybe time to put some more resources into this, and maybe let's release this. And then the beta of Frame was released. And then, that's kind of slowly snowballed to now we're a team of about 15. The Frame product is out in the wild, and we're progressing on it. And while at first it was made with A-Frame, we switched to Babylon.js, which is
why
the reason
why
we're here right now.
Why that move?
Why the move? So
I welcome it, to be fair with you, right? I am super happy of that change, but why?
Yep.
What motivated?
So it's That's a really good and complicated question, and it has to do with a lot of things. One was Jason.
One was Jason. That's the reason why we moved, really?
One
That's
certainly
why he
was
left
Jason.
A-Frame, is because I was over there at the time. He's like, I got to get away from this guy.
No, not at all. When we were in a phase of, we went through a phase of like, hey, this thing has grown even in ways kind of beyond what we thought. Let's maybe rethink our tech stack a little bit. We had become a little bit frustrated with some things about A-Frame, where the strengths of it really helped us get off the ground, and then some of the, I don't want to say weaknesses, but we started to come up against some limitations around performance and some other things that I know that you can do in A-Frame if you like. I think the beauty of the time we live in now is that like we have a wealth of different amazing platforms that people can choose from to build what they want. And I think it's really tempting to get into this like phase where you become so focused on like which tool to use that you don't do the building you're supposed to be doing. It's like almost the hard thing now is actually figuring out what to build. It's not like figuring out what to build with. But to get to the core of like why Babylon, so in this evaluation phase, we were like, oh, do we use Play Canvas? Do we just do raw 3JS instead of A-Frame? Do we do this, do that? And Babylon was of course in the running because it doesn't take too long to find that it's one of the like big players out there. So I met with Jason, and Jason kind of convinced me over a few meetings in Frame that we had over a couple months, like, hey, I think Babylon can do what it is that you need. And not only that, but we have like, we want to support you. We want to kind of partner with you and make this successful and help you really, like you're not going to regret it. And that partnership has come in a few forms. I mean, we're on the Babylon forums all the time where we get just like really quick, close support. The Babylon forums, you just go there, you can post things, give it a tag, and you get a response back really quickly. And then beyond that, when we've been so stuck that we actually just like need deeper help, they've been willing to just hop on call. David, I was with you on some just last month, I think, where we're like squeezing performance out of it so closely that we've just run into some issues. So that you've helped us with, and that kind of support has just been so key.
I think
I appreciate that. Yeah, I
love
like
you sharing. Yeah, I love you sharing that story too, and I think we definitely worked hard in the beginning of the conversation to identify like what is it that you need to do. Could Babylon objectively try and help you do that? Like, our mentality is not to be overly salesy in nature and try and grab as many people to Babylon as we can. We genuinely want people to be able to achieve their goal of creating whatever it is they want to create. And if there are better tools out there to do that, we're not shy by saying, cool, go check out that tool.
Gosh, actually, no, we don't want people to be unhappy, right? Like
exactly.
Said, like quality over quantity.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that really stood out to me and has continued to stand out to me with the partnership and working with the Frame team is there's been a self-service model that you guys have had. You're very motivated to solve problems on your own, as opposed to asking everyone else to solve your problems for you. And we've been pretty lucky for the most part in our forum. There's a lot of people who are motivated to learn, but it's very clear your educational background, Gabe, is probably shining through here for the whole team. But everybody from the Frame team who's engaged in the Babylon forum, it's this quest to find answers, not necessarily, hey, everybody answer and solve my problem for me. And the part that's been the most joyous to me to see is, even though, yes, we could, hop on a Teams call and try and work through a problem together, you've been able to put what's going on into the forum for others to see and learn from. And that's the part, the open source part of me that just loves giving back to the community so other people can learn from your journey. Hey, we're up against a performance problem here, and what do we think about this? And having that discussion be cataloged in a way that future people can learn from it, it just benefits everyone. And you guys, the Frame team, especially you, Gabe, you've been so dedicated to saying, let's put the conversation there. Let's have that conversation as open as we possibly can and let people learn from it. And then if we're really truly stuck or texts we're missing each other, whatever, then we can maybe ask if we can hop on a call or something. But yeah, and the other thing too, I think that's really worth highlighting from the development team standpoint is you are definitely pushing the envelope
Yes.
of a lot of things with Frame. So for anyone who doesn't know Frame, I mean, you can get up to what? Are we up to 500, 1,000 users now? What are you at with Frame?
It was
We're up to
1,500, right?
What we've announced officially is you can have 1,000 people in there. We've done tests now, thanks to the last meeting we've had and the last few knots we've kind of untangled with 1,500.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Like, this is
more people
1,500
than my hometown.
Yeah, I mean, this is 1,500 people co-present in a virtual environment together without perceivable like lag. Like, you guys have done some truly magical things here.
Within the browser, right?
Within the browser. And one thing that I want to comment on is you've pushed the boundaries of performance, which has been really great for us to see where does Babylon fall down? Where do we need to increase performance or squeeze more out of it, or help you guys squeeze more out of it? And that's been really good because your feedback then helps us make it better, which helps everybody. The other thing that you've done that I've been very impressed with is the scale of some of the environments that are in Frame as well. I've had the chance to obviously explore quite a bit into the various environments, and I feel like every time I'm getting in there, I'm discovering new things. But there's one that I spent a ton of time in, which was, I think it's your college campus. I forget what you call it. It's like a campus-like environment, and it's a big, expansive environment that takes you a while to walk around it, with a lot of details and nooks and crannies. And even that, in running in a website, is kind of pushing the capabilities of what can be done in the web, and certainly with Babylon. And so, yeah, the relationship has just been so mutually beneficial for you to get what you need to build this tool, to build your business, and then also to give back to the community by helping us make it better, which honestly is a huge passion of ours. Like, I think a lot of software developers, David, I'm sure you can attest to this. A lot of software developers are like, yeah, our stuff is awesome, and don't bother me. And like, there's no ego here. Like, if something's
we
wrong,
want people to build house with the tools we have, right? Like,
that's right. And if the tool can be better, please tell us how we can help you make it better. So, yeah, it's been a very, very wonderful partnership, and it continues in a lot of different ways too, Gabe. I mean, one way, I know we were talking about this just before we started recording, but you have grown passionate about Babylon, not just as a tool underneath the hood of Frame, but also as a potential learning tool for people interested in computer science and software engineering. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, your YouTuber career.
Yeah, your future career as a YouTuber.
Yeah, totally. So I'm really interested in the learning journey that people go on when they're just figuring out how to code, just like from scratch. And my journey into, I mentioned, like, I started with A-Frame. I really challenged myself. Hey, I want to get good enough at this so that I can teach other people how to do it. Like, that's like a real test, I think, of like, do you have your bearings with a tool or a framework? Can you teach other people to do it in a good way? And so my first like big foray into that is I have a website with like a couple really nicely scaffolded projects that take people from writing their very first line of code to eventually you end up with a really cool like 3D website that you built with A-Frame. But I did that years ago, and it's on a totally I haven't thought about it too much. But now lately, because I've been so into Babylon, I've been thinking, okay, I really, I have a passion for teaching, and I'd love to just get some videos out there. Now, I haven't had the time to do like really closely like scaffolded, like a really nicely scaffolded learning journey, taking people from scratch and then really building. It's been more of a, okay, here's a topic, let's get into it. And I'm sort of assuming that people already know JavaScript, maybe some script, and it's kind of, it's a little easier for me. But I've just had a lot of fun helping people, like making these videos that are just like, particle systems. Let's like dive into a demo, and at the end there's like a little code pen for each one, so you can just go in and hack your way around it. And then beyond that, what I've really loved is using Frame itself to hold these Babylon monthly meetups, which I encourage everyone here to go to. I'm 100% convinced this is some of the best content on the internet right now. If you're into development, if you're into 3D, and you've got an hour of time each month, you've got to go to these meetings. We meet up in a tool made with Babylon Frame so that you can get a sense of its capabilities just by being in the darn thing. And then we have incredible presenters that we've only had 2 meetings so far, but each one has just had such a cool lineup of speakers that really give you a sense of the breadth of what this tool can do and how passionate your teammates are, because each time we've had someone from the Babylon team up there. The first time it was you, David. The second time, Carol, talking about upcoming GLTF interactivity stuff.
And that's very also really revealing some new stuff like no one knows about, and we use that moment to world premiere.
That's
totally. Yep.
That's one
and
of the
we put
really
them on
cool...
YouTube afterwards, so we understand sometimes the timing's not right for everyone, but yeah, it's just been, I love the idea of just like helping people learn Babylon, and I love the idea of it being one of the early things like in their journey, because sometimes when you're learning like JavaScript, you're making a website, it can be hard to get excited about like what it is you're making. If you're just making some other to-do list app, which is what every tutorial has, let's make a to-do list app.
Yes,
it's just not that exciting. But if the pot of gold at the end of the journey is like, hey, at the end of this, you're going to have a really cool 3D site that is going to work like, even in VR. I feel like that's like a really easy hook for people. Like, oh, that's cool. I want to build that. It can really incentivize you to like learn those concepts that get you there.
Yeah, I learned something once from the Make Code team at Microsoft, which is partnered a lot with Minecraft. And one of the things that they discovered, and they're by the way, anyone who doesn't know Make Code, it's a visual editing, non-code coding type of development platform. And they partnered with
Flowgraph in Babylon.js.
Not yet. We don't call it that, but we will.
Not yet. Oh, sorry.
No, it's just kidding. And so the thing that MakeCode really learned is if there is a highly visual output of whatever it is that is being developed, it reinforces something up here in a much more provocative way for somebody who's on their learning journey, right? If you can, convert an array of strings into an array of ints, it's like, okay, but it's different. If you create a picture or you create a 2D sprite or a 3D object you can turn around, there's just something about that's like, whoa, it's really cool. It resonates this pattern of big payoff in that development cycle, which is, I think pretty powerful. You mentioned, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say on that, we've seen on the topic of kind of like starting and cultivating learning journeys for people, one really interesting thing we've seen with Frame that weaves into Babylon is we'll see classes get in there and they'll say, oh, I can bring in a 3D model, and they'll bring in 3D model, or what's this shader thing? We have a few little like pre-made shaders. You click on it and then all of a sudden there's a really cool looking thing in front of you. But beyond that, we've seen a lot of people go, okay, wait, what are these things? How do I build them? Whether it's a 360 photo, 3D model, a shader, a particle system. And what's really cool with the Frame Babylon link up is that we try to help people leverage tools that you've made on the Babylon side, like the node material editor that gives people a visual way to create shaders, or you have like a particle system editor that gives non-technical people a way to make really cool technical stuff. Or like for 3D models, we see, can I build my own 3D models? All of a sudden they've opened up Blender and they're starting to toy around with Blender and they're learning. So like, I love this idea of like Frame as this entry point to help people get into things like the node material editor. All of a sudden you've got people like really incentivized to learn about shaders because they know they can bring them into Frame. And then in that journey, they're learning so much about Babylon, and it might then get them to a place where they think, oh wait, like, maybe I'm starting to write my own code.
Yeah. So, no, well said.
I have a side question for you. When we will be able to use NGE as well in
So the node geometry editor, there are still a few tools on the Babylon side that I think we have yet to really like tie into Frame. One is the node geometry editor because it's so new. Another one is the animation curve editor. Which I think could be a pretty interesting way to help people make animations that can play in Frame. And I think I'm forgetting one other, but it's coming. We've started the thinking.
Lovely.
We talked in our last episode with Gary about a new GLTF extension that's coming called GLTF Interactivity. And one thing that I'm particularly excited about in the future, and I don't even know if this is your plans, this is Jason's wish list of what your plans should be, so forgive me. But I think it would be amazing if down the road in Frame, there was the ability to have people do small degrees of logic that could somehow be stored in their environment and somehow using this GLTF interactivity extension. So for example,
click on a button and you open the door.
Exactly. Yeah. Little tiny things like that. Or maybe even hey, I know you have a mechanism for, I forget your name of it, but where there's isolated sound locations where if you go into this location, only people in that location can you hear and all other sound is kind of cut out. And it might be interesting if there were ways that people could set those up and trigger when those are activated. And, just small little itty bitty bits of logic, like, yes, press a button and doors open. And imagine somebody, morphing one of the frame environments to have these little bits of logic in it could be quite fun and entertaining. And that's
you can create an escape game with that, like an escape game within frame, right? Where you have to figure out where are the hints to open something. Yeah, like that's
very true. Yeah, one thing I definitely, you mentioned this very, very early on, and I'd love to just take a philosophical digression for 1 second, which is you are building a virtual co-presence, productivity, and social platform. Those are my words, not yours, I know, but a lot of people might call that a metaverse platform, and this word is a super overloaded term. But let me ask you, as the creator of a virtual world, what does the metaverse mean to you? And what is Frame's kind of role in that world as you see it?
Yeah, it's definitely a loaded question. And I know a lot of people get very passionate about like what is or what isn't the metaverse. I'm personally not like I'm not super like dogmatic, I guess, about like what it is or isn't. To me, overall, conceptually, the metaverse is a vast world of connected but different destinations. And in some ways, it's still sort of an ideal because we have these different pockets of different destinations, but they're not all connected in the way that like I think metaverse idealists like imagine them to be in this sort of like Ready Player One scenario where like everything's connected. We've got things like Roblox. We've got things like Fortnite, which is like super powerful. There's like new like Unreal Fortnite creator tools are like ridiculously good. I think it's some of the most premier like metaverse creation tools out there. Yes. You've got things on the web like Frame. You've got all these other applications out there, and they're all sort of like isolated pockets of the metaverse. It's not like there's some interface that's connecting them all in some way where you can just move from Fortnite to Frame in some seamless way. But I'm not even convinced anymore that that's actually what people want. I think that developers see this as some like interesting technical challenge that is so enticing and alluring that they like want it to happen almost for the sake of like the challenge of figuring it out. But I'm not actually sure it's what people want. And in fact, a lot of people use Frame because of the fact that when you make a frame, it's private by default. Yeah, and this was actually a philosophical difference, a foundational philosophical difference we have with Second Life, because with Second Life, you get a space in there, but by default, it's public, and you can go through some steps to make it private. But what a lot of people liked about Second Life is that you can run into all sorts of people and things and places, and that's beautiful and awesome for those that want it. But Frame, as you said, is primarily used for like enterprise and education. These are people who want the power of an immersive 3D space, but they don't want it to be connected to everything else. Like they don't want people to just be able to jump into Fortnite or jump in, find some other random frame. Another great product out there, Spatial. Spatial is very good. It's like another like web-based metaverse thing. But when you go to Spatial's website, it's like, here are all the spaces out there, like go jump into them. But like, that's not what we do. People make frames for their own particular little case. That's not often like, oh, we want the internet to come discover it and jump in there.
Yeah. To give you some idea of, I think, for anyone who hasn't played in Frame or in one of these maybe virtual environments beyond maybe a very game-centric one, just to give you an idea, every time that we have a Frame meetup, I kid you not, every single time, our team chat is a bunch of people chastising me that our morning stand-ups are not being done in frame.
We should do it.
Like literally, it's like every time there's a meetup, it's like, Jason, how long until we get to do these in frame? That's the nature of it. So I keep dragging my feet because we need to do that. For anyone who's listening out there who is diving into this space or wants to dive in and understand more about Frame, learn.framevr.io. That's the best website place for people to go as a touching point to kind of learn a little bit more about it. And maybe briefly, if you work for a company, if you work for an educational institution or anything that wants private co-presence virtual experience, maybe you could highlight just a couple of the things that would be useful for people, if you wouldn't mind.
Totally. The first is, it's really darn easy to get into, and it's hard to exaggerate the importance of that. You don't need to download and install something, which can be tough on corporate firewalls, and it's cross-platform because it's a website at the end of the day. So it'll run on something like a Chromebook, which is really big in education. It'll run on something like an iPad. So first, it's just super simple to get into it. And then you can lock it down how you want. If you want to restrict who can access it with a password or with a email invite list. So I'd say that's just like a fundamental win. And then in terms of once you're in there, what can you do? We try to make the basics of collaboration pretty seamless. The webcam, screen share, audio, these things kind of like just work. But then if you need to go beyond that, then Frame has a whole bunch of really cool features that make it so you can bring in 3D models and look at them with other people. You can pull out a whiteboard and start scribbling away on it. You can actually make really sophisticated 3D environments if you're making, like an office for your brand or company that's actually a space where the public might come in. You can actually make something really darn impressive. And you will be surprised by what you can achieve on the web. It's almost guaranteed. Like you'll be surprised at the level of cool graphics, fidelity, realism, whatever it is you're looking for that you can achieve there. So yeah, I'd say like the meeting basics are there, and then you can do so much more on top of that.
I love it. That's amazing. You touched on something that is going to be a brief philosophical tangent for me for a minute. And the Babylon team is fully remote. We're all over the world. We got folks in France, Germany, Brazil, US, different sides of the US. We have always been remote, even pre-COVID. And I often get into discussions with friends and family and people, how does it work for you to work remote pretty much full time? And something that I always draw on to is it's normal. For one, it's become very, very normal for us. And then I think back to a huge portion of my career was in person in big open office spaces. I was never a person who had a private office. I was in cubicle farms, or even better, table farms, where it's like everybody's working together and very dynamic and collaborative. There's one thing that exists in the physical world when you're in an office building together that has perplexed me that we haven't been able to really replicate in a remote scenario, and that's the whiteboard. There's something powerful about the idea of people each grabbing a different color pen and having this giant canvas that you can scribble on and erase right away. And it's funny because there's been many attempts virtually to recreate this kind of a thing. I mean, a company that I may or may not work for, I think, even has an application called Whiteboard. And yet it just lacks a certain something that being in person has. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, Gabe, but the way that the Whiteboard experience works in Frame is the best and closest approximation to that real world thing that I have ever experienced and seen. Every time I'm in there, there's just something about the fact that people can go up to it. It's super easy to grab a different color pen, and it's like kind of grabs most of the stuff of the real world thing and makes it like, oh, this works. This works remote. Yeah, you guys have done a fantastic job. And I know that's a nerdy one, but the Whiteboard has been a tool that's been like critically foundational to my career. I've been missing it since COVID, really, I guess, is what I would say. But yeah, Frame has done that really, really well.
That's good to hear, and I think there's a lot of room to run on the Whiteboard because I think you're right that it does the basics really well. But we're always getting requests if people want to be able to like input text directly on it, and we have like a whole list of stuff we need to do there. But when I think about remote work and some of the challenges of working remotely compared to physical space. I think you're right about the whiteboard being this like key thing. And then the other thing that I think is key is actually just this idea of like a sense of space. But what we have found with the metaverse is that that sense of space doesn't actually need to come from physical space.
Right.
You can have a sense of space from the web browser. And yeah, it's through, it's on a screen. It's not real 3D. It's on you have flat screen in front of you. Even if you're in a VR headset, you're like, it's this illusion of space. But having that illusion of space, I think, can be really important for a remote team. Because if you're only going in and out of Teams calls or Zoom's calls all day, you lose a lot of the magic you get from working in person with people, which is just something
we do not belong
to them in the hallway. When you're on your way to lunch, you bump into someone, and it's not a planned conversation. It's not some Zoom call that's on the calendar, and you're not necessarily talking about something in particular, but it's just the fact that you bumped into them that can lead to the conversation. That leads to all of a sudden the seed is planted about some feature, and then all of a sudden that happens. And I think it's really hard to have that serendipitous interaction when you are remote and just going in and out of Slack messages and Zoom calls.
It's funny. There's a story kind of around this, a pretty famous story. Back when Steve Jobs was alive, when they were building Pixar's current building, they had the architects who had designed the building had bathrooms in different places throughout the building. And Steve Jobs specifically came in and he said, we're cutting out all of the bathrooms except for the very front atrium, and we're making them very, very big. And the reason for that is exactly what you're saying, is that everybody's going to have to do their business during the day. And if that is centrally located, it increases the chance for random encounters. Yeah. And Pixar's building, to this day, their only bathrooms are off of their main atrium for this very, very reason. Yeah. So there is something to that for sure. And I love that you can recreate it digitally. Anything else that you want to say? I want to make sure we're plugging Frame here. It's an amazing product. I'm not just saying that because you're here. I genuinely love what you guys have done. Anything else that you want anybody else out there to hear about it?
Well, I'm in my head, I want to make sure that I'm plugging Babylon as much as I can. I'm less interested in making sure people know about Frame and making sure they know about Babylon. I want to loop back to the metaverse. Like, what is the metaverse kind of conversation we had before? And I mentioned like connected but different destinations. And that's kind of an ideal right now because it doesn't really exist. But the closest thing to it, I would argue, is the web browser, because the web browser is still this thing that is kind of this like meta container for so many different but connected destinations. Just by virtue of being a website, all of a sudden you exist in this metaverse. And so to me, that's what kind of really excites me about Babylon, and all the other tools out there that help you build immersive web experiences, is just that, like, just by virtue of being a website, you can participate in what I think is the most exciting metaverse, which is, the web browser. So yeah, that's just,
that's pretty insightful. And and the cool part about Babylon that I would say that we're very fortunate on is we get to live vicariously through the success of others, right? So Frame is made on top of Babylon. You guys have stretched it in really cool ways, done amazing things with it. We want Frame to be successful because it showcases what can be done with the technology. And so it really is a mutually beneficial relationship. And Gabe, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your passion in the space. Thank you for the energy you pour into the Babylon community. Thank you for the millions of questions you ask that other people might be afraid to ask but are learning from in the forum. And thanks for pushing the envelope. You're making Babylon better by an incredible product. And we're going to do Babylon stand-ups inside of Frame here at some point. I guarantee it. The team won't let me not do it.
And for whoever follow this podcast, please join us next month and every month during the Babylon meetup, right? Like, we're going to have more and more new stuff to present. And that's my personal feeling. It's a fantastic way to see what can be done with Babylon.js when it's well used. So
Yep. And you can hop onto the Babylon forum and search around for Babylon meetups and find the information you need there. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me again. Gabe, it's been a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks for all you're doing.
Yes.
David, thanks as always for joining me on this one. Appreciate it.
Thank you, son.
All right, everybody. Have a great one.
Bye, people.
Bye.